his coach would have to take him out of practice because his own teammates got injured tackling him. As teammate Joe Theismann said, "You didn't hit John, John hit you." John Riggins was a one-man wrecking crew who did not shy away from contact. His running style was not about fancy footwork or finesse, it was blunt force trauma. All that punishment he would dish out over the years led to this moment, January 30th, 1983. What are you saying, guys? It's Zane here. Let's get into the video. The Redskins faced 4th and 1 at Miami's 43. With about 10 minutes left, down 17-13, they decided to go for it. There's 1 yard to go, so everybody knows Riggins is getting the football. The Redskins call 70 chip, which is ideal for these short yardage plays. The ball is snapped, and Dolphins corner Don McNeil comes running in unblocked. But Riggins just shrugs off the tackle and bolts down the left sideline for a 43-yard go-ahead touchdown. Riggins would end the day with 166 rushing yards on 38 carries, which was then a Super Bowl record, and it earned him the game's MVP. Now, it's hard to boil a career down to a single play, but this run really cemented his legacy. That being said, his career is a unique one. He was drafted 6th overall by the Jets in 1971, and his impact was felt immediately. He led the Jets in both rushing yards and receiving, the first player to do so in franchise history. The following season, even though he missed 2 games, he rushed for 944 yards, which is 4 yards shy of the franchise record. He succeeded in 1975 when he became the first Jets player to rush for over 1,000 yards. But stats aren't what stand out about Riggins' career, it was his punishing style. On a routine play that only resulted in a 2-yard gain, a coach of his watched and said it was the most amazing play he ever saw. Riggins would receive a screen pass and then stiff-armed a 240-pound linebacker while a 260-pound tackle hung onto his back. He dragged both of them forward for a tough 2-yard gain. But even though he was enjoying individual success, statistically or on runs like this, the Jets were bad. After 5 years, he was tired of it, so he decided to play out his option in 1975 so he could sign elsewhere the following season. That came at the perfect time, because the courts had overturned a rule that required a team to receive compensation if a free agent signed with another team. That meant there was free agency that is equivalent to today's standards, but it would only last for the 1976 season. Riggins would use that moment to sign a 5-year, $1.5 million contract with the Redskins, but it wasn't the match he was hoping for. Head coach George Allen was conservative, a defensive-minded man, and when they did run, the system was halfback orientated, so Riggins was just used as a blocking back. He amassed just 775 yards total in his first 2 seasons. Now, Riggins wasn't a flashy runner, he was a workhorse back, and he thrived through gaining those tough yards. He's rightly remembered as a battering ram of a running back, but his speed and athleticism are often overlooked. In high school, at 6'2" and 220 pounds, he won the state 100-yard dash title twice, and he could run a 4.6 40-yard time. He was a rare blend of size, power, and speed. Take this play, for example, that came in a 1979 matchup against the Cowboys. Riggins takes the handoff, gets to the outside, and races 66 yards down the sideline for a touchdown. He was also a reliable receiver. He had multiple seasons with 30-plus catches. It would be that all-around athleticism that took him from a great power back to a Hall of Fame legend, and the Redskins seemed to finally figure this out and utilize him properly. After missing most of the 1977 season due to a sprained knee, he'd see a career resurgence as new head coach Jack Pardee was hired in 1978. He'd post back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. Then in 1979, the Redskins were playoff bound. They just had to win the final game of the season against the Cowboys, but they lost in a nail-biter, 35-34, and Riggins was devastated. Even though the season ended disappointingly, Riggins had shown his value to the team, so he tried to leverage that into more money, but the Redskins weren't convinced. At this point, Riggins had established himself as a bit different with his off-field antics, be that the unique hairstyles or iconic one-liners. Yet the football world would still be shocked by his sudden decision to retire after not getting the contract he wanted. Just like that, a career destined for Canton, a player who seemed to be improving with age, called it quits. Enter Joe Gibbs, the Redskins' new head coach in 1981. Gibbs knew there was some diesel left in that tank, so he flew to Kansas to convince Riggins to return. The meeting itself has become part of Riggins' story and his legend. That's because Gibbs would arrive at Riggins' house and find him in camouflage hunting outfit with a big hand in both hands, at 10 in the morning. He offers Gibbs one of the beers, but Gibbs politely refuses. It is 10 a.m, mate, so Riggins just drinks both. As they sat down to talk, Riggins pauses and looks Gibbs in the eye. He said, "You need to get me back there. I'll make you famous." It was a bold statement, and Gibbs was not convinced. He thought,
"Oh my gosh. This guy's an egomaniac. I'm gonna get stuck coaching a nut for 10 years.
Gibbs knew that Riggins still had value though, so he decided he would trade him once he returned. Riggins was 2 steps ahead though. A few days later, when they were negotiating the deals of the contract, he had one demand, a no-trade clause. Why did he actually return though?
I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
That was not hyperbole. Riggins was not a lawyer, obviously, and he had misread his contract. He was expecting to receive contract payments in 1981, but it turned out it wasn't starting till 1983. It seemed that season rusted the engine a bit because he finished with just 714 rushing yards and 13 touchdowns, and 9 of those were for 2 yards or less. That offseason, Coach Gibbs had something up his sleeve. He reshaped the offense to feature a single back, and of course that was going to be Riggins. Running behind the mighty Hogs, the Redskins O-line, Riggins would find massive holes with ease. During the 1982 championship run, he and the Hogs pounded opponents into submission, but the bond between them was built off the field. Take the 5 o'clock club. After practice, Riggins and the Hogs would retreat to a shed, crack open a few beers, and kick back. It was an exclusive club, meant only for the O-line, but Riggins was the exception. That off-field camaraderie directly translated into on-field success. The 1982 season was shortened by a strike, so Riggins' regular season numbers were nothing special. But with the ever-increasing price of gas, he decided to save his fuel for what defines a legacy, the postseason. Upon entering the playoffs, he told his coach, "Give me the ball, I want it." What followed was one of the most dominant playoff stretches by a running back ever. In those 4 playoff games, he rushed for 610 yards. That accounted for 43% of Washington's total offense during their Super Bowl run. I took a few all-time great postseasons by other running backs. I might have missed some, but here's a few to give you an idea. The closest of these examples is Terrell Davis, who accounted for 40% of the total offense. And I made a video not too long ago arguing he was the greatest postseason running back of all time. John Riggins would set an NFL record for most consecutive games over 100 yards in the postseason with 4 that year. And then the following postseason in 1983, he extended that record to 6 games. When a player is so dominant, the opposing team builds a scheme to try and stop them, as they're trying to force a team to beat them another way. But there was no scheme that stopped Riggins. Against the #1 defense in their Super Bowl win against the Dolphins, the Redskins just kept feeding Riggins the ball. It was old school smash mouth football. 4 yards here, 7 yards there, 2 yards here. Then, as we saw earlier in the video, he broke loose on 4th and 1 for a 43-yard touchdown that propelled the Redskins to a 27-17 Super Bowl victory. His career is really defined by high volume, powerful running. After that Super Bowl win, Riggins was hooked. He wanted more. In 1983, at 34 years old, Riggins turned it into his finest season. Over 1,300 yards and a league-leading 24 touchdowns, which was then an NFL record, which stood for over 10 years. To show how good he was in those final few years, I took the penultimate season of some of the other great running backs in NFL history. But bear in mind, not all of these guys were power backs. The Redskins would ride John Riggins all the way back to another Super Bowl. Despite another impressive postseason, in the Super Bowl, the Raiders had an answer, as he rushed for just 64 yards on 26 attempts, but that didn't diminish his legacy. What's so impressive about Riggins is his longevity. He was a power running back, one of the most taxing ways to play football, yet in 1984, at the age of 35, he became the oldest player in NFL history to rush for over 1,000 yards in a season, a record that still stands, and he would tie the league in rushing touchdowns that season. You can see here his age was record-breaking in many ways. 1986 would be his last, at age 36, retiring with over 11,000 yards and 104 touchdowns, but his legacy was really made in the postseason, and of course, being one of the greatest power running backs ever.